It's been 6 years now since we've had the PS4 and the Xbox One with us, and while there have been multiple iterations of each console, including upgraded versions of those consoles with the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, what a lot of people have been wondering about recently is what comes next, and is there still a place for the traditional home console? Well, apparently there is, and there have been multiple rumours and little bits of leaks of information here and there about an upcoming next generation version of the PlayStation console, clearly being dubbed at the moment, though whether this name will stay with us or not is unknown at this point, as the PlayStation 5. Now, whatever the PS5 currently is, it's been in development for at least 4 years, and a lot of people are wondering, in this modern age of technology, what actually has to differentiate a console so that it can be classified as a new generation console as opposed to a current gen. Clearly, the PS4 Pro didn't do enough since it still retained the PS4 brand, as the Xbox One X, of course, was kept with the Xbox One brand. I mean, I guess if Sony or Microsoft tried to release those consoles as next-gen consoles, then they probably wouldn't have got away with it. Least of all because they only still played the same games that the current gen played. So exactly what does a new-gen console have to do? And will it just be seen as a potential upgrade to the current gen, or will it be seen in its own right as a brand new generation piece of technology? Well, according to Wired.com, Mark Cerny has some answers for us. Now, who the heck is Mark Cerny? Well, Mark Cerny was the lead architect on the original PS4 and on the PS Vita, and he's also partnered with Sony over many years and has been part of many game developers that have put out games for their systems. So he seems to have quite a bit of inside knowledge. It's likely that he's working on the PS5, maybe once again as lead architect or some other important role. But he had a few things to say to Wired.com, and he basically wants to make clear that this is a new generation console, not a mere upgrade of what it is that we're currently using. And Cerny says, and I'm just showing you the article here as well, that the key question is whether the console adds another layer to the sorts of experiences you've already got access to, or if it allows for fundamental changes in what a game can be. Well, of course, he asks this rhetorical question because he wants us to know that the answer is yes, the new PS5 or whatever it is that they're working on will add an extra layer to our gaming, whatever that may be, we're not sure yet, but it's going to provide fundamental changes to the way gaming works over and above the current generation of consoles. And he goes on to talk about some of the specs of the console that they're currently working on. In particular, and you can read through this entire article at your leisure, of course, I'm just skimming through it now, there's going to be obviously a new CPU, a new GPU, including architecture that's going to allow for ray tracing. And if you don't know what ray tracing is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a technology that's vastly going to improve the images that you see on screen, especially in terms of reflections and other pieces of technology. And it actually looks absolutely stunning when it's working. The problem is, at the moment, there's very few game developers that are incorporating it and using it. And that's because there's simply not many consumers that are making use of it. Only the high-end current-gen GPUs actually give access to that technology. But apparently, the PS5 Pro is going to be able to also run ray tracing. It's going to be part of the GPU, which is of course going to increase the number of customers, the number of gamers that have access to it, so hopefully it will be made available in many more games. So obviously we're going to have big upgrades to the CPU and GPU, and also I find this quite interesting. It's something that I thought the PS4 Pro and Xbox One might have incorporated, but apparently they didn't, and that is that the new console is going to incorporate an SSD drive instead of traditional hard disk. Now, that's a little bit of a long time concern of mine in terms of the fact that, you know, SSDs have been out on the market now for many years, really. PC gamers adopted that technology a long time ago, it seems, and yet the consoles have seemed very slow on the uptake. I get that they're still substantially more expensive than standard hard disks, hard drives, traditional mechanical hard drives, but the prices have dropped dramatically in recent years. So I guess it just makes sense now to incorporate that technology. The problem is that larger capacity SSD drives are still quite expensive, and I don't think you're going to be getting away in the next generation with including a 500 gigabyte storage or even a 1 terabyte storage in your console. With games now, especially the 4K, you know, full works games, coming in sometimes at over 100 to 120 gigabytes for one game, you're simply not going to be able to bundle a single terabyte drive with the console and expect to get away with it. You're going to be looking at 2 terabytes minimum, which for SSD storage is still going to be a little bit pricey. And I think that's going to pretty much be one of the reasons why the rumours are also suggesting that whatever the PS5 turns out to be, it's going to be debuting at least $100 to $150 more than the PS4 originally debuted at back in the day. So yes, we get a little bit of information here which you can check out just about that SSD, which Cerny is talking about there. And there's no doubt though that an SSD provides substantial capabilities over a hard disk drive, and anybody that switched out gaming on a hard drive to an SSD will of course notice those differences, in particular with loading times. Loading times are a big thing, especially in the current gen when you've got all these 4K textures to load. On a traditional hard drive, you can be waiting for several minutes at a time. And apparently, according to this article, the next gen console will also support 8K graphics. And not everybody's adopted 4K yet, so it seems they're going to be future-proofing things right from the get-go here. But 8K graphics for games that start incorporating that kind of technology, that number of pixels, that's going to be a lot of gigabytes and a lot of horsepower required to output those at any kind of usable frame rate. Maybe you can get away with that with PC games, when you might just get 1 or 2 people willing to spend the thousands of dollars that are necessary in order to accommodate that kind of number of pixels. But for a console, that's going to be a real challenge to get that into a price point where people are actually going to be able to afford it en masse. So we'll be getting a new GPU, new CPU, and an SSD instead of a hard disk drive, but all of this stuff rather seems like a bit of a formality. I mean, it's not really going to be surprising, is it, that the next generation of consoles are going to be of a higher spec than the current generation. That's almost a given. So there's not really a whole lot in this article that's really, you know, all that surprising to us, as I say. So how is all this new technology going to be used? Well, although Sony wouldn't actually comment on this himself, he does perhaps allude to the fact that virtual reality may end up playing a bit of a larger part, a larger role in the next generation of consoles, in particular, of course, as far as he's concerned, in the PS5. And that just makes sense. We've seen Sony try and adopt this a little bit with the PS4 in terms of PlayStation VR. I've not used that myself, but from what I heard, you know, it was quite a comfortable headset and seemed to work quite well. And that was with a console that that wasn't released natively supporting such an endeavour, whereas the PS5 is being built from the ground up in order to do so. So I do suspect that VR will be quite an integral part of the PS5, whether or not it'll be included with the console or a separate add-on. I'd still imagine, I hope it would be the latter, I should say, because that's still going to add the price quite a bit, and not everybody's going to be interested in the VR tech still. But for those that are, it'd be a good option, I'd imagine. So it will certainly be more suited for that. But also, how is it going to compete? And this is something that's being noted here as well to a certain degree, with the cloud-based gaming services that are also on the horizon. Incidentally, Google have recently announced Stadia, which is a cloud-based gaming service, something that I'm not particularly on board with yet myself. I've got to be completely frank and honest with you. I'm much more excited about the actual consoles, the actual upcoming generation of consoles, than I am with all this cloud-based stuff. But are Sony and Microsoft going to be including other technologies in their consoles in order to accommodate those kinds of, you know, other upcoming services, the cloud-based services? I know that we already have PlayStation Now, for example, from Sony, which is a form of cloud-based gaming. Be interested to see how much they continue to adopt that technology going forward with the PS5. Although a lot of that isn't determined by the specs of the console. So if they're going to be boasting about the specs of the console and just how powerful it is, and then they're also going to be focusing on a cloud-based service as well them two kind of seem to negate one another to some degree. But right now, Cerny says is that Sony are cloud gaming pioneers, but he's not going to be sharing any more information about that at this time. And finally, what about some kind of release information? Well, Cerny's remaining tight-lipped on that, as we might imagine, but one thing that has been said is that we definitely will not be seeing the PS5 this year in 2019, though other leaks of information, internet rumours have suggested that a release next year in 2020 is entirely possible. I fully expect to hear some official announcement of some kind for the PS5 this year, 2019, before the end of the year. And if that is the case, then a release next year seems all but, well, a definite thing, really. But there we have it then, guys. A little bit of news for you on the upcoming unannounced PS5. What are your thoughts? Please do share them below in the comment section. And I'll see you next time.